And welcome to the new Kevin Smith, The Great Witness Show. It's April 6, 2022.
Among the real side experiences I have shared has been the inclusion of those that involve interactions, dealings with, and indeed attacks from creationally powerful beings. Indeed, on the last show, I would share how through the inciting of demonic characters to attack a group and I, through that which we were creating, would it become necessary to contain, to put out of the way those particular demons, that they can no longer interfere with what Dwayne and the guides are working on, setting up and promoting galactically. But how does a being become powerful in relation to others, or the vast majority, as we all are this all alive, real awareness, a real awareness that is this, isness everything? And so, from that real position, no individual can have or be anything more or less than any other. There are positions of endless recognition within the ears, as it is an endlessness, and so we could say that a true silent one, through the recognitional standing they have, would be more capable than, say, a guide, as recognition must always equate to a more so position, and that would translate in such a way. But regardless of his recognitional extent, if one has recognition of it and resides within the ears, this still is a position of everything. And so how would everything be able to impose on everything? How would a being be able to express a want to have a power over another, as to formulate a situation where such a scenario can be so, of one dominating another? This could only take place where this everything position both beings are can be removed from. So specific, isolated idea situations can be experienced and played out. As with the ears being this everything reality and position, the only way something can be separated from it, something experienced from the whole, the idea of an agreed scenario of one being dominating another, this can't take place in the true everything reality. It can only be so where such ideas can be isolated and experienced, and that would be the creational simulators. The ideas we decide upon, that which forms our consciousness, so formulated is a particular consciousness according to the nature of how we have designed it, the ideas we have agreed to and installed that make up its construction. We can construct then our consciousness in any way we want, as anything can be created and experienced in the simulators, and according then to the ideas we decide on, so this affects into our body types and our experience. And body types and any capability, skill, or talent we have is simply based on the decision that it be so, and then as we maintain a focus with certain ideas, so these will develop accordingly, build upon themselves lifetime to a lifetime, and so what can emerge in the simulators are powerful beings who have developed the ability to potentially manipulate creation or others in whatever ways they have decided, as really just like computer game characters with varying attributes, we decide, program in the ideas that dictate our personal self's skills, powers, and abilities. The consciousness is programmed, it affects the corresponding body type, and with the corresponding abilities, whatever they might be. And so we have these demonic or powerful beings that have simply decided to be this way, and this is then their body type and experience accordingly. And as all consciousness is interwoven, in that it overall affects the simulator, this presents as a shared stadium or game arena where every being whose consciousness is a part of the effecting of can potentially encounter each other on the physical and on the real side. It's as though the overall consciousness is one overall virtual reality headset that contains the affected overall game, and every individual consciousness then is rather intermeshed with every other, and effects into this collectively affected and maintained overall simulator, each individual body vehicle with the mechanics to perceive the ideas of the consciousness into a simulation to experience. And so then all the individual consciousnesses would have created their characters, their game avatars, according to how they have constructed their consciousness, and we have then all the simulator participants with varying attributes, skills, powers, etc., and also intent, as not only will beings create their characters' abilities, but also decide how they will use them, how they will operate in creation. If they have decided to be the good guys or the villains, broadly, categorically speaking, although all ideas and intent and decision as to the roles we play are still created ideas, and any idea, if held to, will maintain you as the effects of. The roles of the hero or those of the villain will equally keep you in creation, and so these created consciousnesses will operate according to their construction, unless a conscious effort and decision is made to change decided direction, as it were. Otherwise, most will continue as they always have, experiencing based on programmed patterns of familiarity, habit, and comfort providing a routine. But despite a character, a consciousness, having whatever abilities it may have decided upon, as everything we experience is through the ideas we agree to and install in our consciousness, then regardless of another's powers or talents, they can have no bearing on any other unless there is agreement this can be so. For everything is a programming, like files, that dictate everything we experience simulated-wise, and we are the programmer of our experiences. Through the mechanisms of the 5 vehicles, that which we decide and agree with effects into our simulation, and so regardless of how powerful an individual has decided to be, yes, they still may enter our experience. It is a shared overall simulated arena after all, but we decide as to the extent, or if at all, they can impose their powers upon us. If abrasive imposition is indeed their inclination, if they are ill-intended consciousness, personal selves. And so, unless we consciously agree that this be so, then the only way such beings can dominate us is through agreements gleaned more surreptitiously. If, say, a certain idea is presented that looks beneficial on the surface, is agreed with therefore, but like all surface ideas, which must always have a consciousness of a certain idea construction and intent that created them, so agreement to ideas presented always carry a package of unseen ideas with them, and if the intent consciousness construction is that of the want to dominate or control, like any idea we agree with, we experience. And so inadvertently, if we only are able to make our determinations of the surface ideas alone, which absent of a real awareness connection that allows for all ideas throughout the consciousness to be known, we will be agreeing with more than we bargained for, as we only have the personal self to work with, a personal self that generally is very limited to just the surface literal view, unless perhaps the personal self is more developed in that it is more able to access the greater dimensionality of the creation it is a part of effecting, like psychics for example, but generally a personal self alone will very easily be marketed into agreements that are programming the consciousness that will effect then situations where we experience being controlled, dominated, etc. And over lifetimes, these sneaky, marketed agreements all stack up, and we have a subconscious that is full of these various installed agreements to various individuals that dictates the potentiality always of them dominating, harming, or destroying us, according to the agreement-specific parameters, should they enter our experience and decide to do so. Really then, two consciousness programmers have decided between themselves how their characters will be in relation to the other, and installed the idea files that make it so, a kind of automatic, unrealized mechanic, that even though we are deciding it, that we are programming the consciousness in relation to others, a kind of karmic contract, most will be unaware of this, unaware that they are the programmers of their simulated reality, and that in reality nothing can happen as experience for them that they haven't agreed to. And thus we have our creationally powerful beings, the demons, etc., and as powerful as they are, that they can exact this power over any other is strictly agreement dependent, and all body types, all consciousness constructs, demons, reptilians, or whatever they may be, still encase a real awareness that's a singular drive is to recognize the it is a part of. And so, irrespective of a body type, our primary assignment is the promoting of the and affording to all the opportunity to supersede a doomed and deteriorating simulator. And so, very often, we will seek audiences with such demonic beings, track them down to wherever they are residing in creation, and extend to them this opportunity, as every being is precious, and every being retracting agreement to the consciousness through the process of awareness that has them gradually more so standing real in their real awareness aside from the consciousness, is less a burden on the simulator, as the consciousness is the simulator, and an overall consciousness of control and distortion, as it happens to be, effects into a reflected, deteriorating, and eventually imploding simulator. So for every consciousness of ideas released, so does this help offset the simulator decay. But of course, there are certain demonic and powerful beings that choose to continue to operate destructively, even at this late simulator hour, and that have no interest in the real universes of the or their real awareness. Again, really their ability to disrupt and harm others is an agreement contract between all involved, so the participants are just choosing to experience what the agreement contract dictates, the abusers and the abused playing out their simulated, decided and shared experiences in creation. However, every idea always reflects its nature. Everything rather balances itself out, and despite agreements that have permitted individuals to be able to be abusive, the abusers will still face themselves and their decided consciousness construct as everything always equals itself. Everything is itself and meets itself and its nature. An abusive consciousness will be affecting experience along these lines, and as the effects catch up with the individual, so they will have to deal with experience that reflects such an overall inclination, their body types, their simulator positions becoming as distorted as the choices they make, and so the abusers, the dominators, the ill-intended become lower astral positioned as an example, and find themselves in a twisted body vehicles, etc. And when it comes to powerful beings interfering with the galactic projects and the aware individuals involved, they will meet the effects of their choices, but in fact, rather than allow cause to effect to play out as it will, so can the effects be rather managed creatively that can overall be more beneficial. The guides can, as an example, throw disruptive individuals into the phantom zone, a place where the ability to create is nullified, and where the individual can interfere with others no longer until released. Again, really, such a placement is just what the individual had really decided to experience, by virtue of the ideas they had agreed upon, the life choices they had made, that rather than effects playing out that may have them lower astral placed, say, an alternative is the phantom zone, because still from a lower astral based position they will very likely continue to attempt to be disruptive. And there are various similar versions to the phantom zone. I've seen large penitentiaries on the real side, where dark force characters are contained, and in the last experience I shared on the previous show, the group and I were doing a similar operation, containing the demons that attacked us in some manner that had them displaced and out of the way. So it seems that according to the individual and their decisions dictates the reflecting effects they will walk into eventually, but that certain containment options can be utilized as an alternative, and these alternatives must be along similar reflected lines to the effects the disruptors have created for themselves, that say fall within the same frequency parameters as the effect that is generated from the decided idea. And on occasion, on the real side, not only will these ill-intended characters be displaced as a variation on the effects they had created for themselves, but the very ideas they are creating that will impact adversely on all those that agree with them can be destroyed at their inception point, as every idea begins on the real side, and as these ideas are agreed to, they instantly are then effects experienced by those agreeable on the real side, and as agreement is maintained to them, so they filter through to the physical, and process through somewhat a delayed sequence of events that the decided limitations of time, distance, and various other factors through the consciousness dictate that an agreement to an idea isn't instantly so on the physical as it is in real side reality. If there is agreement secured to roll on the agenda of the controlled human situation, This instantly will be revealed and be so on the real side, but the consciousness limitations of a physical level decided mechanics dictate that you can't instantly manifest an extensive new array of FEMA camps, say, they must be built, etc. And these real side ideas, these agreements, are as programs installed into the consciousness, and will then motivate behavior on the physical, and motivate the necessary action within the consciousness dictated limitations expressed onto the physical, to ensure that these ideas become a physical level manifest. But the ideas must first be created and presented, and will be ideas that are backed with a package of unseen consciousness ideas and intent. And this overall idea then always will express as its nature. If we agree to it, we will experience the effects that reflect it. And really, destructive ideas must express as their nature. The essence of them is self-destructive. For those that agree to them and those that create them, so do their experiences reflect destructive, distorted ideas, and overall then, the overall consciousness as an overall idea of distortion expresses its nature, effects unto itself, effects as a simulator destruction and implosion. So a little like how the guides can afford an alternative situation to the effects the disruptors will walk into at some point, instant alternatives, as really all effects are instantly so. They just take the moments they do to sequentially play out in a simulated creation. So can these destructive idea creations, rather than be allowed to play out with the agreements to effect the corresponding destructive simulated situations, so can the effects be instantly managed, the ideas can be destroyed. As really, the ideas being destructive in nature are simply instantly meeting then the essence of themselves, without the need to let it play out as it will in a creation. And so, as I said, I've had experiences where I've been with groups and we have been destroying these dark force controlling ideas at the moment of their inception, and this expresses in whatever simulated way that it might, as us destroying buildings, blowing up dark force strongholds, or military areas, etc. This real side experience would be along similar lines, a distorted creation and fashioned by the hands of creationally powerful demonic type beings. They were building and creating then within the overall simulator arena, as it must be for anyone who creates and has a consciousness that is a part of the overall consciousness that affects into the overall stadium arena, that yes, you can create whatever you want, but always it will be on the overall simulator stage, as your consciousness is a part of that which holds up and maintains that stage. Like a computer game you play, as you play your character, you are contained within the boundary of the game that your character is a part of effecting, and so anything you individually create through your character can only always be within the game arena, for only through your consciousness can you create anything simulated, and if your consciousness is a part of the constant maintaining of the overall simulator you are in, your creations are always within this overall simulator stadium. For as I create an idea, it is a part then of my consciousness that is a part of all consciousness that affects into the overall simulator, and so the idea features within the simulator for all whose consciousness is a part of, to potentially experience. This particular idea construction was not only created by an assortment of various demonic type beings, but they had rather taken up residence there also. The layout was vast, a dark and forbidding area, a reflection of its nature then, not dissimilar to how the lower astral appears, and maybe even this was where this area was located. There were a series of structures, very Gothic looking, that housed demons of varying degrees of power and capability. The entire setup was effectively a containment for any being who had, through their agreements, consciously or subconsciously, extended to these demonic beings and their power, effected then circumstances in which they were rather imprisoned here by the demons, and subjected to all manner of tortures, abuse, as this was the general inclination of the demons involved, and whose created situation this was. The demons themselves were of varying distortions of body type, some very gruesome in appearance, again body types in reflection of an equally as distorted consciousness. There was one top demon who resided in the largest castle-like structure, who seemingly kept himself to himself, though oversaw all that transpired here, and all demons positioned in this place answered to him. Their inclinations then were based on nothing other than to alleviate boredom in creation. This was their brand of thrill-seeking, of sensation gratifying, that of the abuse of others, all made possible through the agreements from their victims they then could utilize to play out their decided simulation. The general species subjected to the demons' torments were predominantly human, as humans are very much one of the species that are so easily controlled, as they are so dimensionally limited awareness-wise that they can't see or recognize that which they are agreeing with. They are very easily manipulated, and indeed as they are a completely controlled species and subliminally bombarded from cradle to grave, so tend to accrue endless agreements that extend to endless ill-intended beings subconsciously, that then play out in the ways that they do on the real side and the physical, as in this example. Interestingly, as I entered this situation, accompanied by a group of awareness becoming individuals, as I said, it was operating as a creation through a consciousness that would effect openly into the simulator arena for anyone to access and experience. I had the strong sense that I had experienced this very place before, although I had no personal self-reference from this current lifetime of having experienced it. If it was a real side experience I maybe have had already, it's possible I had forgotten it, or failed to bring it through to the physical on waking, because our personal memory has capacity, can only contain so much, and that which the personal self is being shown, we can only tend to retain or hold on to so much at any given moment, potentially through the real awareness that is through all consciousness, and therefore all the ideas of it that are effected into a simulation. We can be shown anything that the consciousness overall comprises of now, in the nowness of the real awareness, isness reality, but tend have the personal self shown just that which makes the most sense for it to see at any given moment. And of course then, everything that the consciousness overall comprises of, as effected into a simulation, will be known to the real awareness, and so everything would seem familiar, as we have our real awareness connections, even though the personal self had not experienced or had remembered experiencing whatever it is that it is being shown. Even lifetimes our personal self hasn't actually experienced, as the real awareness is part of all awareness that is through all consciousness, and all lifetimes lived as effected from it. So lifetimes that technically we haven't personally experienced may also seem familiar, through a real awareness that animates through all consciousness, and all lifetimes ever lived effected from it. So familiarity would simply be that which through a real awareness that is through and is then experiencing everything consciousness-wise, so would every experience the personal self is shown, experience that is effected from overall consciousness, potentially have with it a sense of having experienced it before. And maybe I had even been one of these humans who had also been subjected to the demon's torments in this real side position, and such had occurred at a time when I was still rather one-dimensionally focused, and so such happenings I would be unconscious and unaware of, that it was a situation I simply hadn't had revealed until now. And indeed, I have been shown many an experience of being subjected to torment and harm on the real side throughout my years in this lifetime, but that I had been unaware of at the time, but revealed relatively recently. And so, this is rather a constant in creation, of abuse, torment, etc., much of which is real side based and goes widely unrealized, unless the guides do show us, etc. But as I was saying earlier, in regards to displacing or dealing with abrasive, disruptive individuals, or dealing with their created ideas, we can fulfill a role as being the delivery mechanism of the destruction of these kind of situations, as really we are representing then effects these demons and their creations have decided for themselves. We can be the agents that displace or contain such characters, or dismantle their creations and distorted, simulated ideas. And so the group and I would rather lay siege to this demon stronghold. It was rather an overwhelming visual bombardment for the personal self to deal with, but overall we were tearing down these buildings, breaking them apart, etc. The demons housed within them would naturally attack us, but we seemingly had no agreements within our consciousness that allowed the success of their attacks, regardless of how powerful and creationally manipulating they may be, and that maybe even if we did once have such agreements, they were now released, which would be an essential prerequisite for such an operation, as there would be little point engaging with the demons if we had agreements that permitted they could harm or eliminate us. And as we destroyed the buildings, as the demons attempted to assail us and were unable, so all the current batch of imprisoned humans and other body types faded away. For with the idea of this situation destroyed, there can be no idea to agree with, and then experience the effects of. You can't be imprisoned if there is no prison available. Although very likely the agreements that had those imprisoned here, the agreements to the demons, would be maintained, as until addressed and released, so will always be affected into experience the ideas we cling to. And although this particular creation was dismantled, it's likely, as these agreements to the demons that allowed this situation to be so are maintained, so will this present as similar situations, where those agreeable to the demons' power will always potentially have circumstances where they can be dominated by them in the various forms and expressions that can take. But it's possible also that we may have displaced and contained the demons, just as we did in the previous recounted real side experience on the last show. For otherwise they surely would just set up shop again, and continue along their decided lines of general abrasiveness, although if we did with the lesser demons, this I wasn't shown. One building remained, that of the largest castle where the most formidable demon resided, and so we laid siege to it, stormed the castle, and the group and I would engage the demon in question. Again visually chaotic and nonsensical for the personal self, but overall it took somewhat longer to deal with this top demon than the others, due to his additional capability, but once again his power over us, or anybody, always is agreement dependent, and we were absent of any agreements that would facilitate his success in defeating us. With this demon, unlike the others, it was very apparent that we were exacting the means of his containment, to get him out of the way, that he no longer could present as a threat to anybody in creation, and again the means of how this was so was difficult to describe, but also that while we were containing him, he was scrambling to utilize a very powerful artifact, an artifact that seemed to be essential for the maintaining of this overall demonic area in some way that wasn't revealed to my personal self. And evidently, even with this place destroyed and his castle soon to follow, the artifact must have properties that he considered would perhaps assist him, although ultimately he would fade away. He was contained, and the artifact, which looked like a kind of purple glowing gemstone embedded in an amulet, was left behind. Seems then we had a dual purpose for our operation, not only dealing with, displacing, and getting out of the way another batch of disruptive demons, but to acquire this artifact also. That, yes, anything created can only have any kind of a bearing or significance in creation. No created idea has anything to do with the real awareness or the ears, other than another means to recognize it through a comparison, and really the idea is to get through all creational ideas, to not be attached to, or cling on to, or be locked into the effects of them. But if anything created can provide benefit, in that it can improve situations in creation that facilitate better the awareness process, as long as we recognize to not be absorbed into the created idea or any idea in creation, then it makes sense to utilize what has been created, that through agreements in the consciousness have effected certain objects, artifacts, or whatever into a being, that have some kind of a power, and if this then can be used beneficially, then it makes sense to surely do so. And little was revealed as to what this powerful artifact might be used for, but nevertheless we had acquired it, and there the experience would end.
Thank you, Kevin, for the experience. I have a few comments here I jotted down. And the boys, or the real guides, they look to, you could say, like each initiation you get, we don't have initiations anymore, but to move people along, so to speak, to another level, which actually there are no levels, but you could say in terms of awareness, expanding or your awareness, they look at people's intent. And I heard Dwayne say they look to see if they're harmless. It's kind of interesting. It's like when they're harmless, they're ready to move on to the next level. Do no harm. And this makes sense because you want to be, you know, in that area of purity and sincerity, and your intent has to be pure. So to move on in your awareness, it's not about belief or faith or hope, but it's about being pure, sincere, and do no harm, basically, too. We don't hear that much, but that it too. It's like you're, in a way, able to be trusted to take on what the awareness is that you have agreed to. Okay, next, it's not about being good or bad. You mentioned that. It's about, really about just being and clinging to these ideas, either good, even clinging to being a good person can keep you in creation. You can get immersed in either one of these ideas really good. Being a really, really good person, like a martyr or a saint or a master, or being really, really bad, the evil ones, the demon, devilish, and all that. Either one of those can keep you here in creation. So you want to be indifferent, really, to any ideas you have here, to the consciousness that you've created for yourself and agreed to. Next, you actually release the burden on the simulator by becoming more aware, which is interesting too, because the simulator here, or creation, is imploding by the agreements that people have to its demise. So the more you wake up, the more people wake up, the less pressure creation has, and it may last a bit longer here before it implodes on itself. So these are all interesting ideas that people probably don't consider because they're used to the wisdom, the traditional wisdom ideas that have been around for a long time. Okay, next is everything equals itself. So that's another item here on that was brought up. Everything equals itself. So if your intent, basically it boils down to your intent. If your intent is pure, again, pure and sincere, wanting to wake up to more, well, that equals itself right there. It equals waking up. If your intent is evil, then it's going to be, that's going to come back to you too. So it's about seeing. You're not going to see it all because that's impossible, but you'll see as you move along in this process of becoming more aware, you'll see how things keep opening up to you, but you'll never see it all because that's just too much for both the personal self and even the real awareness does not recognize itself to the fullest ever. There's always something unknown, and that's where really you have to look, is to the unknown part of yourself. because that's how you wake up, to something known. And then you move on to something unknown again, and it's a process that you go through. Otherwise, you get into this comfort, safety, security zone where you're just stuck, basically. You may have a good time for a while, you may be in heaven for a while, but after that, you get bored. Like the next point here, people get bored. The controllers get bored, and they start doing funny things. They start torturing people and find pleasure in people's discomfort, because they're uncomfortable, because they've stopped becoming more aware. They've decided to do basically nothing. They've learned how to control and manipulate creation, but they're not doing it for the benefit of all. They're doing it for themselves, for their own pleasure. So after a while, it gets bored. They get bored and they start liking to see people squirm and be tortured and stuff. That gives them the only thing they got. And then we go on to humans are easily controlled because they're one-dimensional. So that's why we encourage people to wake up to something more than the usual here. They're been indoctrinated to. We give people the opportunity to wake up to something more. There's more options available. Otherwise, you're going to be listening to David Icke and all these people, David Wilcox and the whistleblowers, which are providing the information and knowledge, but they don't really give you the way out of the matrix, or this prison yard here, this prison planet. We provide that. We provide the cure. You have to do it, but at least we point the way and give you references that make sense to your finding your way out. And then the last thing, the artifact that you found, Kevin, we'll see where that goes. These artifacts are these things that could be used for either good or bad. So maybe the artifact could be used to help wake people up. And even if it was used for ill intent, it could still be reversed or re-engineered so that it could be used for people's benefit. Just like the controllers have created this infrastructure for people, well, we can come in and displace them and use their infrastructure for the benefit of people. Just like we're using Facebook. Facebook is a spyware, basically, but we're using it for educating people and sharing with what we're doing. So thanks again, Kevin. See you next time.